think around like 20% of Americans are reading at like a fifth grade or below reading level. So all of our content is at a fourth grade reading level. Like that is our baseline. Ethically, we think that is the right thing. I think an empathetic product is something that tries to anticipate the user's needs. It's intuitive to use. It's not causing additional stress. So it's easily like scannable, understandable. So that's something that we're always striving for.
Welcome to Creative Health Tech, your dose of strategic creativity from the minds push the boundaries of the health tech industry. We are your hosts, Felipe Silveira and Half Marks, founders of Moe Studio. So in this episode, we're discussing the challenges of working in the intersections between content, UX writing, and customer experience to deliver truly therapeutic products. Joining us today is Danielle Kosecki, Senior Director of Content Design at AbleTo. So Danielle, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, first of all, we'd like to hear more, of course, about you, about your expertise, and what actually led you to work with health and wellness.
Yeah. So I work at AbleTo. AbleTo is a provider of virtual evidence-based mental health care. I've been working in the health and wellness space almost my entire career. So I grew up very active, played soccer competitively, played soccer in college. And then when I went to grad school for journalism, I kind of started thinking at that point about working in magazines. And I had someone kind of look at my resume and kind of say, like, hey, you should think about the health field because you have like this background, playing sports as an athlete, working with coaches. So at one of my first jobs out of grad school, I was working as a staff writer at some regional magazines, and I was one of the most active people on staff. So they just started assigning me like any stories that involved physical activity, which I loved. And one of my editors there ended up leaving for a job at Prevention Magazine. A paid internship opened up there, which was like not common at the time. So I kind of jumped at that. I got that job. And then I've been focusing pretty much solely on health and wellness since then.
Nice, yeah. So we have this rich career across, both roles in health companies and magazines. How do
Mhm.
you think that shaped your approach to content design for mental wellness, like Able to?
Yeah. It was actually a pretty smooth transition. I think when I came up through magazines, it was kind of during and after the 2007 financial crisis in the US, which meant like our staff sizes were just getting smaller and smaller every year, which obviously
Yeah.
not great for like work life balance, but it meant that I was able to work on a lot of different things. And magazines are a brand, a product. So right from the beginning, there's that mix of like the execution of the work and the creative side. So like working with designers, working on photo shoots. I've worked on when I was in magazines, like obviously the writing and the editing, but also like social media, repurposing content into different products, working on books and user test panels. So there was a lot of similarity between magazine journalism, especially, and then working on a product. And for me, I've just tried to carry that through with my work and any teams that I'm managing. So I think two big things would be like the editing process. Magazines have like a very rigorous editing process. Like you're usually going through multiple rounds with different editors, figuring out how to, make sense of all their feedback, which sometimes is conflicting, and just putting together something that is going to be relevant and helpful for your target audience. So that's something that we do at AbleTo. I was able to hire a former magazine editor here that I work really closely with.
Nice.
Obviously, we have those rounds of editing with our clinical team as well. And I think the other thing that's really important was just fact checking. It's not optional, it's part of the process. So obviously, we don't have like a dedicated fact checking team here. Editors and our clinical team, like we know that everyone is responsible for trying to make sure that we are using the best available evidence in of the work that we're doing, where it's going through, multiple rounds. So we have those different people kind of like checking the studies. We have legal review, we have compliance review. Like it's definitely a part of the process at Able to
Yeah,
where we have those checks and balances to make sure we're presenting the best available evidence.
Yeah, and
that's awesome.
and I know that you have added therapists in the content creation process. And how does that collaboration work and influence the tone and structure of the content that you're making?
Yeah, good question. So we have therapists involved and also behavioral coaches. We have 4 different products at AbleTo that kind of like span the acuity range from low acuity. We have a self-guided self-care program. We have therapy, coaching, and then we have a product that involves therapy and coaching for people on the higher acuity end of the spectrum that are dealing with mental health issues and also a physical health condition. So that's one of the things that I really was really motivating for me to come work at AbleTo because I knew that they embed their clinical team in pretty much everything that they do. So from a product development standpoint, we have a clinical program development team. So we will have usually like a therapist or a coach kind of embedded from the beginning of any project. They're helping to do research. They're helping to develop the BRD, the PRD. They're in every working session, like looking at product flows, copy. And so that has been a standard at AbleTo since before I joined. When I came on board, I was the first content lead that they had hired. So one of the first things that I did was kind of extend that practice into our content development. So first things like, let's say like long form content like blog posts, they are involved with helping us plan outlines. So like the reviewing outlines, we're interviewing them for the blog post and incorporating their quotes, and then they're part of that like editing and review process. So they are really part of like every step of the way because obviously, like as journalists, we can do a pretty good job of like evaluating the research, but the coaches and they add like a different texture because they have personal anecdotes. They're able to explain how to, like take CBT principles and apply them in real life. And we do have one therapist right now that is actually writing copy for us as well. So
Oh,
just
nice.
really nice to kind of get that first person perspective. I think it adds a lot of humanity. It brings our providers' expertise to the forefront for our brand. And I think it just helps a lot with kind of like credibility and trust among all of our members.
I think
Yeah.
also helps with the language as like
Yeah.
for those consuming the content, going through the process and seeing like therapists, the professionals, they might have a level of knowledge that someone working uh design creativity content might not have, and by doing this you combine both their expertise in, of course, creating contents at a high level, but bringing the high level experts to enhance this content, and make sure, of course, it's not only correct but can also speak to the right person that is on the receiving end.
Yeah, and I think it helps a lot with consistency through our members' experience because we want to make sure that like the terms and the way that our providers are talking about certain things in session is going to match what we're saying in our content during the onboarding process just to like minimize any confusion. And obviously there's a lot of just like jargon and technical terms, so we really work with them on trying to
Yeah.
make it understandable for the
Yeah.
average person.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, the doctors they know a lot, they have a lot of skin in the game, but also they maybe know too much. They forget that we are normal human beings that didn't study all those things, and a lot of times we get lost, even though they tried their best to communicate. There's a gap that is really hard to kind of jump if you don't have the actual co-creation, right? Because like you have one expertise, they have their expertise, and when you work together, like you can each other feed it like kind of the gaps and make sure that the content that is being displayed is balanced for like kind of it's accurate, but it's also easy to understand.
Yeah, exactly. Like we don't want to strip it down too much that it's going to like lose efficacy or, we're straying too much from what, it has been shown to work. So it's definitely trying to strike that balance.
Yeah. And in your view, like what makes the content supportive in the context of digital mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for us, there's kind of like three big things that we keep in mind. The first is accessibility. So, especially within the mental health field, a lot of people that are dealing with mental health challenges have like another challenge that they're dealing with. Like they might be neurodivergent. They might have a comorbid health condition like cancer or diabetes. They might be visually impaired. Like we have to make sure that our content is accessible for everybody. And another big thing, like we know, I think around like 20% of Americans are reading at like a fifth grade or below reading level. So at AbleTo, like we make all of our content is at a fourth grade reading level. Like that is our baseline. Ethically, we think that is the right thing, but also within the US, for anybody that is on Medicaid, in certain states, fourth grade is the law through through CMS. So that's kind of like our base. We check the health or literacy score for everything that we produce. I think the second one is just like that we're creating empathetic content and experiences. So obviously like voice and tone, we want to make sure that we are kind of like meeting our members where they are, compassionate, but we're not talking down to them. And then, like, outside of that, like, I think an empathetic product is something that tries to anticipate the user's needs. It's intuitive to use, it's not causing additional stress, so it's easily, like, scannable, understandable, so that's something that we're always striving for. And then the last one for us for sure is evidence-based. The tools and the content that's gonna have the best chance at being therapeutic or, like, helping somebody get better is rooted in the best available science. So, we obviously we're working with our clinical team. They're constantly reevaluating like best practices, best clinical guidelines. That is something that's really core to our brand. And it doesn't mean that we don't innovate, but like if we do, we're trying to take that kind of like responsible scientific approach where we're like starting small, we're testing, we're iterating,
Yeah.
we're trying to like do no harm essentially. So that, yeah, that's really been something that's been core to the Able to brand for a long time and really important to the work that we do.
Yeah, so of course you mentioned you're working with evidence-based, and in the end, able to use an evidence-based product. What does it mean in practice for your team when you talk about like content, marketing, and also customer experience? And how can you, in your role, actually ensure it stays accurate across, updates, different platforms when you talk about an evidence-based product?
Yeah. Obviously, governance is hugely important and also a big challenge. So, evidence based for us, I think when we're working on content, we like as a brand, the rule is to try to have like obviously the best available evidence that has been published within the last 5 years. I think also like we try not to cherry pick evidence. Like if the science around something is like weak or inconclusive, we'll try to say so. But we really lean heavily on our clinical team to help us with this. So they have regular reviews that they do to determine if like the best clinical practices around something has changed or like the science is changing. And if they identify something, they'll contact myself, marketing, kind of whoever owns content that is affected by that change. And then we have like a timeline by which we need to get it updated. For our kind of long form content, especially blog posts, because we cite a lot of research in there, we'll kind of do some regular reviews as well. Like right now, we've just been updating a few blog posts that we did very early in my tenure when our reading level target was 6th grade. So we're trying to bring that down. And as part of that, like we have to update blog posts. Like some of them are getting a little bit old. And like anything that we do is going through legal and compliance review. And like our lawyers will be like, they'll flag it. They're like, hey, can you like check and see if there's any like better research available. So it's kind of like everybody that is touching the content is kind of keeping that in mind. So I think it's about kind of like having systems set up and just like standards in place so that you know when to be checking content and kind of have those checks and balances in place.
And also having in mind that like it's important to bring in those evidence-based content, and I feel like
Absolutely.
with that in the team you have, there is not only bringing uh the last thing that's happening in the space, the research and all this, but you have also the expert team that understand this and can actually evaluate as well the level of the evidence you're bringing in. The thing is you mentioned in being in a way transparent and not biased by the research. We're mentioning something's more inconclusive and or not. I feel like this is really really important, and as we're not just trying to make everything look great, but actually giving all your users or customers what is new, what is how has been the latest research, what is the evidence going on, and allow them to also experience by themselves, especially when you're mentioning this on bringing it to a fourth grade level. I feel like this is great when you talk about think about the customer experience and how they're gonna be think about who's there in the receiving end.
Yeah, and I think one big thing that helps is when it is kind of like a company priority.
Yeah,
You have to have leadership that believes in the importance of evidence-based practices and allows time for the teams to do that work, and prioritize that work. And that's something that like has just been core to Able to from the beginning. So I think, like I don't ever have to fight to like make time for my team to do that or work with our clinical
yeah.
partners just because it's so baked into what we do as a brand and how we operate. So kind of makes my job easier on that end for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Can you share like an example of a moment when this content alignment across teams actually helped to elevate the user experience? Of course, we talk about a lot of stuff, but is there any specific example you can give that comes up to your mind?
Yeah. So I think one thing that's a little bit unique about my position is I kind of oversee content across the whole ecosystem. So we work on marketing, we work on product development, we work on like what we call editorial. So all of our like blog post videos, meditations. When I started at AbleTo, we were about 6 months out from launching our newest product, which was self care, which is a completely self guided experience. Members can log into the app and it's kind of like choose your own adventure. Like they can choose what type of content that they're interacting with. There's check ins, there's mood tracking. And so, as part of my initial job, it was really building up that initial content library. And initially, we were thinking all of that content would live within self care because the members that were in our coaching and therapy programs, they already had a curriculum that they were working through with their provider.
Yeah,
But that started to shift a little bit. We were thinking a little bit more of like full suite, like what happens when someone graduates from that program? Like, why not give them access to the resources so they can have a better self care journey? And then it was like, well, why not just give them access to it all the time? Like, it's additional support for them. So we ended up going that route. And so a big project that we worked on was developing out our Explore tab, which is where pretty much the library now lives. Initially, it was very small. We only had, I think, like two content types in there, like meditations and something called collections, which are a little bit of like a guided journey towards a specific health goal. So we worked with our clinical team and our product designers to do some user research to kind of figure out like, how are members going to be using this content? We had a constraint, which was like we were not going to be able to have a search function. So that made things difficult. So we did like user research to try to figure out like, are they coming in and they're like, I have a specific problem today that I need help with? Are they just looking for a specific content type? Like, I want to do a meditation. Are they thinking about duration? So we did a lot of user research on that and put together this new Explore experience, which allowed us to bring all of our content in our entire library in there
nice.
now. And so then we worked with marketing to kind of bring this to our members. Because a lot of our coaching and therapy were not, they weren't going to be aware that this was available unless they were just taking the initiative to poke around the app. So we worked with our marketing team to kind of like add a call out to our monthly content newsletter to let people know this was available, to onboarding drips that we had and like other type of like email drips to let like existing members know that this was available. We worked with our learning and development team to let kind of like train our providers to say, hey, you can let your participants know that this is an additional resource that they have. And it was you can kind of see in the data, like, especially after, like, a lot of the email communication started going out, like, the engagement just spiked. So I
Wow.
think that's, like, just a really good example of, like, all of the teams kind of coming together to bring this new experience to light. And it's just been really rewarding to kind of see the immediate engagement. And what we're trying to kind of track now too is trying to see, does this increased engagement lead to better health outcomes? And it's looking very positive. Because we do have, like, optional assessments or check like, mental health check-ins that they can take within the app, and so trying to pair those 2 things that, like, obviously, we want people coming back and using these resources for as long as they need, but, ultimately, we wanna see that it's helping them get better. So that's been a really rewarding project to work on and something we continue to iterate on when we get new data and new information.
Yeah,
Well,
I
that's
imagine
great.
not only rewarding but also challenging, right? And would you say that this was the biggest challenge that you and your team have faced, or do you think about anything else?
It was definitely a big project. I would say, like, one of the most challenging things for us is obviously, I think, with a lot of content teams, like, you're working with a finite amount of resources that you have to figure out how to strategically apply to the continued product development. So, like,
Yeah.
this project was similar. Like, we had constraints, like, we had budgetary and development constraints. Like, I would have loved to have some sort of search function or something in there. Like, it wasn't going to be possible for the MVP. But even like taking a step back, like there are so many like content related projects happening at the company. Like if you think about like we have a ton of marketing work, product development across 4 different products that are user facing, and then we also have the provider facing platforms, and then also just like our own content calendar. So I think the biggest challenge is always trying to make sure that we are strategically aligning our energies to the right projects. So for us, that has meant taking part in like annual planning and quarterly planning. So at AbleTo, we do annual and like kind of quarterly check-ins. So when I first started, I had a content designer that was kind of just getting pulled in every direction, working very reactively. Like she was fantastic. Everyone wanted to work with her, but it was just like she's just fielding requests from everywhere. And
Yeah, too
like
much. Yeah.
too much, getting brought in way too late. So we kind of like instituted a practice of like we need to be brought in during the like yearly and quarterly planning. If there are projects that are tied to like our most important business goals or OKRs and they're complex or important, we will embed a designer, a content designer into that project. For smaller stuff, I put together an intake form so they can request our support. We'll take a look at like current bandwidths and like assign the workout. And then we also set up weekly content office hours so people can just drop in and get help. And then we just tried to like kind of help teams help themselves with documentation. So holding lunch and learns to teach people like here, how do you evaluate the health literacy of a piece of content? Like here's step by step how to do it, why it's important. How to apply our content style guide, making sure everyone has access to that. So really just doing a lot of like training and education so that for the really small stuff that I don't want my team spending a lot of time working on, like a tiny copy edit, like just teaching the teams how to do that work themselves or giving them other avenues so it's not taking away from the highest priority.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I'd say like on a company, of the size of AbleTo, like it makes sense that the challenge is, keep innovating on the new strategies while continue to do the work that needs to be done. Because I feel like one thing with content is that there is a never-ending, work that needs to be done. At least like the bare minimum we all know with social and emails and all kind of materials, communication materials. But you need space for to innovate, to implement new strategy, new ideas. Like you mentioned, explore a section. And I can easily see how this can be a big challenge. It's less about the challenge of the content itself, but on handling innovation while keeping keep the work being done where it needs to be.
Yeah, yeah, and we want to save time for the kind of that creative exploration as well and head down thinking time and we try to build in time. We've done hackathons in the past. Just, we try to build in a little bit of that and just to get off the like day-to-day treadmill of just like
Yeah,
executing and make sure we're still doing that like vision work and giving a team of creatives time to be creative, which I think
Yeah,
is
yeah,
is
yeah.
important.
which is important not only for the present but also for the future, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, for example, like you said, like about having the hackathons and having those workshops and letting the creative, be a little bit on their own mind, see what can come up. Like, what do you see as the future of content design in this space?
I would say something that I've really been thinking about and I'm really curious about is Figma's acquisition of Payload. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
they acquired this headless open source CMS, which I'm interested in because we also use the open source CMS for the Able2 app. And I know they're going to initially integrate it into Figma sites, but it seems like the direction that Figma is going is like essentially they're going to be like an end-to-end like product management platform. So I'm just like in my head, I'm like, God, what is this going to mean for content designers? Like, I think initially there's could be like a lot of efficiencies with like content modeling, like pairing up with designers. I can think of a number of times when we're in like a working session in Figma, we're reviewing flows and we're like, wait, what is actually in production right now for this, like one of our products for this certain user? And like somebody has to log into our CMS and like double check it. And it's like, if that's all integrated, like it makes things so much easier. I think the handoff to devs will be easier and like hopefully fewer like and build errors and just being able to go right in to the CMS and like edit the copy without like disturbing design, I think could be huge.
Mm-hmm.
If we add AI onto that, I'm not sure what they do.
Yeah.
Like, could AI start like recommending different combinations and deployments? Like, the sky is kind of the limit there. So I'm really, really curious to see where that goes. My hope is that it doesn't silo content designers so that like a big challenge that we always have is a kind of like getting brought in too late to a project. And if it's something large, like I don't want to see content designers only getting looped in once everything is in the content management system. Like it's too late at that point. So like
Yeah.
hopefully like still involved from the beginning and not just like becoming editors at the last second to like fix copy. Because that's not
Be
like
involved
we're
in the
not gonna.
creation of it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm really curious to see what they do with that, and I can definitely see it moving into kind of being like an all-in-one, like, end-to-end solution for product development and deployment.
Yeah, Figma has been like growing massively in the past years. I think every year when they release some news and updates, we see more and more of those integrations. I remember seeing something like this in the past events, and especially on content creation in terms of like updating visuals and make it like a click and have a lot of those pieces. And like you said, if we embed AI to that, and especially within this connection with CMS and the Figma and the visual, they're gonna be huge.
Yeah. I think also just the prototyping, like
Yeah.
the prototyping will be way more accurate, and I think that could also be really helpful for content designers. Like, obviously, we're pretty good in Figma. I think a lot of, you have to have Figma skills, but we're
Yep.
not true product designers. So to be able to like bring an idea to life that your product designer that you're pairing with can then like run with, or to show to stakeholders like an initial idea and getting that spun up really quickly to get approval, and then like kind of going back and going through all the best practices, I think could be really, really helpful and just kind of speed the rate at which we're bringing really helpful experiences to consumers.
Awesome. So Danielle, I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. It was a pleasure. And if anyone watching or listening to us wants to connect with you, where should they go?
LinkedIn would be great. Yeah, I'm on there. I'm always happy to connect, so feel free to reach out. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to keep up with your next episodes. And if there's someone you'd like to see in the podcast in the future, please send us a message to cht@moe.studio. Thanks. Bye.